All right. My name is Michael, and I have been working on a card game since February. The card game in question is very much inspired by my experiences playing Commander because I very much like the free for all and expressive nature of Commander, but I find it very frustrating to engage with as a more competitively minded player, and doesn't really have anywhere for you to go once you are deeper into the game. It kind of stalls out. But, um, well, this is not a video about Commander. This is a video about Realm, which is the card game that I've been working on. Realm has, I would say, three key design elements that I'm going to talk about. Crucially, one of them I think is very interesting and novel. One of them I think is okay. And one of them I think needs a dramatic rework. So if you're watching this video and interested in TCG design or game design in general, I would be very much obliged to hear your perspective on especially the third one, but all of these systems, everything is in flux, and I am very much open to feedback. So all that said, I'll go into a bit of a survey of Realm. So Realm is, these are more or less placeholder arts that I've done, but the theme of the game is kind of xenobiology, like fantastical sci-fi rather than magic or sci-fi fantasy or something like that. And the first interesting innovation in the game, or thing that I don't see very often in other games, is that the casting system is simultaneous. So rounds are played all in parallel, and there's three different phases of casting, and cards have a diagram that shows, oh, can it be cast on the first phase, the second phase, and the third phase. And then there are a few mechanics around that make it so that the third phase can account for all of the rest of interaction that you might need to have in some kind of counter war. So these are the stub of the interaction spells. This one can be played on the second casting phase, and these are both direct interaction but also meta interaction. And the way that the game handles this is there's a kind of soft exile. You could think of it, about it similar to reserve in Altered, or the kind of soft exile states that you have in Magic. I don't want to get too into it, but essentially, I think with some tuning, this can be made to work, where players select their cards simultaneously and place them face down, and then all reveal simultaneously, and then there's a structured selection of targets, and deciding whether or not you actually want to cast the thing that you set out to cast, or if you set out a few options, which of them you're going to end up actually playing. So this is kind of the main concept that led me to think maybe this is actually a overall novel project that is not going to end up just being, you can see how Magic inspired my designs are here. This kind of simultaneous play aspect of the game was the first thing that I came up with, and the main reason I said, well, maybe I can actually make a game that's worthwhile. These are rules cards that I made. So you can see every round has a division between the warp is casting. So you send the things that you are actually declaring, and then you declare your targets, and then only after targeting, ignore this for a moment, only after targeting do you commit to whether or not you're going to cast the spell and pay for it. The second aspect of the game is, because I wanted to design it around free-for-all multiplayer, I wanted the core interaction experience to be less destructive than, say, Magic, because of when you actually engage, you're making a strategic blunder at some kind of like game theoretic sense, because if you trade down, then the other players are ahead, right? It's the classic, anyone that uses an interaction spell is shooting themselves in the foot. The most recent Distraction Makers video, this was talked about as a threat, compliant, and the enforcer. If you're viewed as threat or enforcer, then this is not good. And so politics become very dominant in the game. And politics are okay, but the main reason I play these games is to interact with the mechanics, and mostly I am interested in these mechanics. So all that preamble out of the way. After I had this outline for casting, I realized I needed interaction on the board. I thought I could get away with the victory point dorks. It felt like there wasn't enough meat on the bone. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I ended up with these two different stats. This up arrow is a Vi stat, similar to attack and or power, and the two here is the hinder stat, which is similar to toughness or defense, except they also have durability, which is toughness. So the way that these interact is in combat, in a contest, beings with stats for the specific phase interact, and you sum up all of your pluses and subtract everyone else's minuses. And then after all that, whoever has the highest score is going to win that round. So you don't necessarily have to lose your stuff in the process of interaction, but things can meaningfully interact every round. I'll come back to this in a second. This is the thing I think is the weakest element of the game design, but the thing that makes this particularly weak as a design right now, I think, is there are 3 phases in which a being can act. The reason for these 3 phases, everything that is cast has a landing phase, an impact phase, because I wanted it to be possible for some beings, creatures, to come in faster so that it's like they have haste, or for some spells to resolve on the earlier phase so that they can affect the thing that comes later. I might have eliminated with a kind of more nuanced system for unrolling targets in terms of resolution. But for now, everything both has a casting time frame and then a landing time. So there's effectively a clock that goes round every turn, and the first few ticks of the clock are casting, and then the last few ticks are resolution. And I thought it would be a nice symmetry to align the resolution ticks with the ability to act in the realm. So the ability for beings to act effectively in combat. And so there's these 3 ticks. This leads me to the problem with my pseudo-combat interaction system. Each being has 3 potential ticks, 2 stats per tick, and they also have a toughness. So while in Magic, a creature is 2 numbers and some text, this is conceptually 5 numbers and some text. I was hoping that the fact that you do a collective equation would simplify things, but in my limited playtesting, I found it very hard to figure out what was actually going to happen, and I made the thing. So I think that probably this is going to have to get simplified somehow. So some big problems with the onboard interaction system is, I mentioned that there's a large amount of numbers. They are sparse in their interactions. In trying to sketch out a strategy circle, I had the defensive player be overstated, but not really able to block the aggro player. And this is kind of crude, and the result is that they just don't interact at all. I don't think that's how that should work. The other thing is that damage becomes overpowered if only a few things are doing any damage, then removal is like really strong. And I didn't play it enough to observe a clogged board state from no natural culling process, but I suspect that that would be an issue. So I'm not really sure how to balance that. There's part of me that says I should look more into Tableau style games to try and make things more like lean into that engine building element, but I'm not sure. Finally, I will go over the thing that I think is okay. In Realm, a lot of things are done simultaneously. There's also a priority chip that goes around, and this means that they are the first to take decisions. And one of the most important decisions taken every round is players place a marker. There are 2 impact sites, and each of the 4 players places a marker on these impact sites, and that determines who they're actually going to be competing with and what victory point resources they can actually obtain. So they put down their marker, that increments the victory points on the impact site, and then they compete over those victory points. And whoever has the most VI, the offensive stat, when all the math is said and done, on each round, they get the delta of highest and next highest points. So that way there's a competition every round. It doesn't necessarily require going all out against each other. In my opinion, this can negate some of the feels bad, and it can also, it's unavoidable. You always have to do this. So you can't really sit in the corner and not compete. Your entire board goes to the impact site and competes on your behalf, no matter what. It's kind of a semi-controlled auto battler. At least the core combat mechanic is like a semi-controlled auto battler. This kind of goes a bit more into detail on that. This also means that board interaction spells or effects are impact site local by default. The idea here is it leads to more board state chunking, and that players will, through the priority system, end up self-selecting into 1v1 a lot of the time, but not all the time. And so you can have a dynamic yet well-chunked multiplayer interaction. I'm going to go over a little bit of how my first self playtest in Tabletop Simulator went. I found when playing my own game in Tabletop Simulator, being able to predict what would happen when 2 players go to the same impact site was very difficult. I was surprised more than I felt like I should have been. It's kind of why I'm not 100% sure that I need to rework the board interaction system, but I am pretty sure. I don't have enough cards that are meaningful within the warp casting system to have a serious bead on if the systems I've developed for that work well. You really have to figure out what is the core interaction loop, and that's actually my dudes attack your dudes, or my explorer goes exploring, or whatever. You have to figure that core thing out before casting spells really matters that much. So that's the nuts and bolts of Realm. Hopefully enough information to develop some opinion on the mechanics, etc. I'll go into a little more detail. So these little pawns I was using as the markers. These are the impact sites accumulating victory points. There are 2 decks. One is for lands, but there are also special lands that you can't read it, but they gain you victory points when you are willing to give them up for a while and then try and score them on the impact site. So the spatial element, I think, adds some depth to the field without being yet another lane or just another battlefields from Riftbound. So I was very inspired by the Animal Kingdom quest system. So, all right. This is much longer than I wanted it to be, of course, but hopefully that it provided a good enough outline of Realm. There's going to be a much larger video if you want exhaustive details on all that I've been up to on this project. But really, I'm trying to keep this one leaner so that other design-oriented folks can get to the point and maybe give me advice about what you think I should be focusing on more, or what aspects of this project stand out as intriguing or like never going to work, that kind of thing. So thanks.